Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is McFarland Muledi. I'm your host this morning. Welcome to In Conversation with Women of Unilever series. I'm immensely proud and honored to be given this opportunity. In fact, I feel like I'm on hello turf. Somebody else should be sitting in this kind of space when you're surrounded and supported by such powerful and incredible women that have done absolutely amazing stuff in their own right. But I am humbled. I think with so much power sitting here, you know what they always say, that your network is your net worth. So maybe I'm rubbing shoulders with the right people. So I'm incredibly honored to be here. I think this series is something that I've been watching over the past couple of weeks, and I think the most important thing that it does is about empowering the young female leaders that are coming in this country, and we see this sort of strong move and movement to try and ideally do great things for the girl child. I mean, just the conversations that we're having with Mama before we started and got to the side, it really makes us want to stand up and make an impact, whether you're a man, woman, or in whatever space or sphere that you're in. I think it's very important that we start elevating women to the positions that they deserve, that they should be, and I think the series is doing an incredible job at that. I really have much to say from my side in terms of who the speakers are. I think they can definitely speak for themselves. They have done incredible things in their own space. We know the work that has been done politically by Sithe Mlambo-Ngcuka. Sithe is our leader here at Unilever, but I'm going to give them an opportunity to ideally introduce themselves, tell us who they are, and then we'll start the conversation going. So thanks to everyone that's also joining us via the various social media platforms. Thank you so much for logging in. We appreciate your time. And without further ado, let me start with Phumzile. Good morning, Ma.
Hi, good morning. My name is Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. I'm a retired gogo. But I run a foundation in Pretoria that's focusing on education, and in particular also pushing the girl child. And I do a whole lot of other things, but that's my main focus.
You also did say so Pema Gwinya Mnate, so we must come and visit.
Well, I see we've got a supermarket here, so I can just get things from the shelf.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mac. My name is Sithe Ngobese. I'm Director of Corporate Affairs for Unilever Southern Africa. I mean, if I had to go, who am I, where I am? I was born in Sharpeville. I'm very proud of that. And I'm really excited. I was telling Meg this morning that, I'm sitting next to a giant, so I'm going to have my act together. Thank you so much, Meg.
It's an absolute pleasure. Look, the focus of this discussion is going to be around policies and initiatives to ensure real economic empowerment. What we're going to try and ideally do in this next 60 minutes is to have a dialogue that we're going to discuss, explore, and look at policies that are influencing, that will ensure that women thrive in corporate, as well as what they're doing in the sort of entrepreneurial space. And to almost like start the conversation, I think it's important that we understand, the importance. Investing in women's economic empowerment sets a direct path towards not only gender equality, but the most important thing is, if we're going to put these policies together, how do we now also make sure that we give access to financial assets for women? Because it's one thing to have this great policy, but what does it mean for them?
Well, I think we are in a context that is quite skewed. Women have limited access to finance. Women don't run financial institutions, so there isn't the solidarity they can take for granted within the institutions themselves. And because this is such a major issue, it has to be dealt with at a policy-making level. We haven't always found that our policies look deep at what needs to be done for women. If you remember when we started after 1994, when everything was changing, it felt like we're going the right way, but we just have not gotten there. There's also the issue of assets that women have that they can bring in order to leverage other resources, which are scarce as far as women are concerned. So I think that if we can ensure that we have a policy that makes it compulsory for access to finance, access to means of production, not to be given freely to women, but to remove the many barriers that women have to cross before they can arrive at a desk that will give them help. It's just the many barriers that women have. And when we see the women who have been successful, who are few if you consider how large the pool of people called women is, we see the people that we see every day, there's an illusion of success because we see these few women who are doing so well, but there's such a large majority of women who are outside this group that is successful. So it's also about thinking about those who we are not reaching, who are not even looking for R1,000,000. They are looking for really small amounts of money and then support so that they get to the next step. So it's a little bit of everything. It's not just the money, it's a whole package that is upside down right now.
And I think I'd like to bring you in there because you've been on the ground. I know
I have been, yeah.
you worked with the Township Economic Development Program. I think it was in the Northwest
Yeah.
and various other places. So you would know the real struggles of
Yeah.
women. And I know that your program was also directly towards empowering women, especially dispaza shop, tax shops, etc., etc., and trying to create some sort of procurement pool for them. What did you find on the ground? And what Mama is talking about here to say, it needs the whole package.
Look, I think let's start by saying 34% of women are unemployed in the country currently, and I think in 2020, President announced the 40% procurement plan, which is focused on women. And my question has been, what are the monitoring systems on the ground to make sure that this is implemented? So in 2017 to 2020, when I was still working on the ground on the township retail economy, you found a lot of women. Women are very strong. And if you look into the landscape of township economy, you will find that it's predominantly women who are pushing the businesses. However, I think they do not have sufficient information in terms of what does this 40% procurement plan by government means. They're not available to access certain, like Mama say, they're not even properly leverage on these plans that are being implemented. So I come back to Unilever. I think when I came to Unilever in 2021, one of the things that made me want to work for this organization is because that they're far ahead in terms of making sure that there's a balance in terms of gender in the country. Globally, we're sitting at 50%. Locally, we are on 56% and more in terms of balancing the diversity. And I'm not only looking into only women, I'm talking about LGBTQ community and disabled community as well. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done. Yes, we have these fantastic policies that have been announced, but are they being properly implemented and monitored on the ground for us to get the women empowered?
Mama, that's a very, very important question. You've been in government before. I know you say you're a retired gogo, but nobody ever retires. I know it with my mother as well. They never retire. But in the work that you've done, not only in government, but also at the United Nations, which should now be at a global level, you've interacted a lot in Africa and had an opportunity to be able to influence policy. What have you found at a sort of continental level in terms of how women need to be empowered? Have you in any way also managed to be able to influence policy or even regulation for that point of view to try and change these sort of barriers that have been put into place for women to be able to thrive?
Well, representation plays a very important role in what you are asking. It's important to have women make the policy as well as implement the policy. Because they have an understanding of the lives of the women they're trying to change. Africa is probably not doing very bad. It's just that we've got so many problems. So our women representation is not the worst, but it's not where it is supposed to be. Women are not always in position where they can make real decision that impact on the communities they are trying to, whose lives they are trying to change. And so a problem that could be sorted out very quickly and very easily the answer is sitting somewhere, it zigzags. By the time it comes to the person who's supposed to get relief, it's no more as powerful as it is supposed to be. So even when we think about South Africa, yes, we've seen women coming up. Women are in specific, impactful position, but it is not in the majority of where the decisions about the sharing of resources that you find a significant number of women. So if you could imagine, if in the world, nationally, regionally, globally, which I've seen around the world, if you had women at every point where decisions were being made, we could change so much, because women, we know exactly what needs to be done. And I'm not saying that all women who are in senior positions always think about other women, but the majority of them do. And they make an effort, and they push. They just will use anything that they can have access to in order to bring about the changes. And we just do not have a critical mass of women making those decisions. So I would again say we have to continuously call for adequate representation of women, so that the changes that we make sense to the women as well. I think there is something very immodest about patriarchy, which tends to think that the decisions, and even women, we do that sometimes, we refer to men, and it gives them the powers that they kind of not deserve to be in charge of us. So we really have to dismantle. I mean, if you think about the country, the world, it is such a mess. Who is leading this world? The guys.
Hey, I can't even defend you guys. I'm sorry, man.
And I'm not saying that women are perfect and good, and not all men are bad, but let's just have representation.
Yeah.
So that everybody can give their best. Right now, you just have underutilization of the talent that exists in the world. So yeah, yeah.
I think, Mama, you mentioned something that's very important. So I'd like you to have a look at this, because, you know, in everything that you say, there's also an underlying tone to say, when women are put in those positions, you know, what are they doing to make an impact, to make a difference? Because the sort of pulling down syndrome of, you know, it's almost now that you've got a seat at the table, you forget who you're supposed to be bringing with you at the, you know, at the back. And I think for me that is the greatest travesty, because, you know, women, and I can't speak for them, but I've seen it many times where how this lady is now put into a position of power, yet the women are the ones that are suffering. Get to the table, it doesn't mean that you have to go play golf with the boys. You know, you can still be a woman and lead and bring other women up with you. How do we now also change that? Because that's also a huge mindset that needs to change.
I think this is a very interesting question, because I often say myself that this thing, it's a perception that most women, when they go into this position, they're not bringing along. I mean, I've seen colleagues and friends that are very close to me that are working tirelessly to make sure that we bring up the young ones. But I think you need to understand, Mac, that yes, I have to play golf with the guys, because this is where the decisions are made, unfortunately. if I'm not part of the conversations that are happening at a golf course or wherever, then I miss out. Then you come into the boardroom, people make reference to, oh, when we were at that golf match.
Yes.
So you have to be able to, you know, to step up. But look, I think this is a leadership question that you are alluding to.
Yes.
As a leader, what is your responsibility to make sure that you lead from the back and make sure? I'm very fortunate, Mac. My team is only ladies, and they know my priority is to see them go up and break the barriers as well for them to be able to do what they need to do. But I think also when you find us in these boardrooms, don't make an assumption and think that it's good and well and cheesy for us. There's a lot of things that are happening in those boardrooms, and we end up suffering from, especially black women, on you know, the what do you call the syndrome?
Pull down syndrome.
Not even
Imposter.
imposter syndrome, you know, where you constantly have to question yourself that you are adequate, you can deliver as per your male counterparts in terms of the responsibility. So people, when they're watching from outside, they're assuming that it's well and good. We're fighting battles that are even bigger inside when we're trying to pull everything up with us.
And Mama, it's quite interesting. I mean, you were in government, and at some point there was a 50% representation. We were going in the right direction, and everything was going well. But we seem to have regressed from that, you know. And there are policies. You know, and in fact, those policies are getting bolstered every other year, and changes are being made. But why are we regressing? We're not seeing that sort of 50% representation that was being pushed before, which is something that your generation was very powerful on.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think it's important to say that the drive to participation of women is not something that should only depend on women. It is a societal problem. I think good men have to be in the forefront and pay their dues to society by making sure that they leave the world a better place. And gender equality is one of those areas where they can make a difference. So when we talk about the fact that we are not seeing more women, I think it would be really good to see men standing up and saying, I'm not having a team that is skewed like this. I want to see women and insist on it, so that you do not give every woman who comes into a situation a responsibility to have to shoulder the work that she has to do, and then to fight for women all the time, even though I think we must, because we are not there. But actually, we actually need the men to play their role. You know, privilege is not always obvious to those who have it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you just take it for granted. I'm supposed to be here, hey, you know, if you're not there, tough luck. That is something that I think we have to absolutely change. You know, at the UN, we used to have panels where it is all men. Until we made a policy and said, you are not going to be given a hall, a venue to host your workshop, your whatever, if your panel is one sex. This is how desperate you have to get. You have to deny people venues so that they introduce both sexes in their panels. So I think in the spaces that we're in the changes that we are seeking, we have to be that dramatic. Whether it is women being employed in senior positions, in committees, tasks being allocated, you have to be granular about who is there, what is their responsibilities, what power do they have, until it feels normal and everybody does it. Unfortunately, I would have thought that by 2023, we would be much far, but yeah, it's disappointing.
How are you finding in the corporate space?
You know what, Meg? I wanted to reiterate what Maya just said in terms of this issue is a societal issue, right? And when you look at it from a perspective of private sector and the government, we tend to work in silo when it comes to this issue. I was a speaker last week in an event where they asked me to look into skills development. And my question to the CETA was, but how do you formulate your skills development, the trainings? Do you come to corporate and say, what are the skills that you need for us to be able to go out there as government and train adequately in terms of need, your needs? And I think up until we sit down, we form what they call the PPPs. We're still going to be singing this song because we are trying from a corporate perspective to look into the full value chain from our procurement systems. But if our procurement systems are not speaking to the direct need on the ground, we're still going to have this problem. So I think it being a societal issue, it calls for government and private sector to say, how can we work together? I'll give you an example. When the country, in other countries, the country specifically started introducing the shopping malls in the townships, people thought, wow, this is so great. I'm not going to take a taxi to go to Val Mall or to Sandton. But what we failed to understand at that time is that mall close to you was going to take away businesses from women who have started, like generational businesses that were there, were shut down. And what it meant is Umamu Vilagas, who gets money, let's say 10 rands yake, that he gets from, call it Sasa or so forth. 7 rands now go to that mall for her to be able to get the food. 2 rands go to a shop when you want it, why? But you must remember South Africans no longer own those shops. That's tech shop. And 1 rand go to MTN. But really, when we talk about circulating the economy, during 2027, I was an advocate and I spoke to government and I said, you are in a position to support women in the township. You have programs such as the NSNP, you have clinics, you have hospitals. What are you doing to support the local tech shops in terms of National School Nutrition Program? Are you looking for Abomama around those schools to be the one feeding the kids? Train them, be the one who take responsibility because you own the resources and you are in a pivotal position to be able to help these businesses be sustainable. So it's a PPP matter, it's a societal, but we need to take more responsibility as government and private sector to make sure that we support the communities.
And we can't even touch the issue of NSNP. I think over the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen stories out in KwaZulu-Natal as well as in the Eastern Cape. Where it's a travesty what government is doing. It's not like our people cannot, grow vegetables. I mean, the biggest procurer is government. The biggest procurer is government. So why can't the wealth be spread out? And we are not initiating policies that are able to really empower people. And we don't have to look far. As you were saying, Bona Bomme that live within the locality
They
are the
could
ones
be.
that should be benefiting. But,
We have an elephant in the room. All of these things we're talking about are just side issues. We have a crisis of leadership.
Yeah.
This is why we have this whole all these shenanigans in the country.
Yeah.
And that is where we actually have to focus. If a leader behaves badly, you give license to all bad people to be as bad as they can be.
Yeah.
yes.
If a leader is strict and straight and does the right thing, you create a role model that people can look up to and aspire to be. If a leader behaves badly, you enable criminals to feel that this is a person
This is the
that
norm.
behaves
Yes.
like, this is the norm. This person behaves like us. So we really, all of us, in whatever leadership position we are, small or big, but especially the big people, you have to be so careful. You have to be so proper. Because to be in leadership is a privilege. People allow you to give them direction. If you go the wrong way, you are taking society with you. And I think this is something that we have to call for, we have to fight for, and we have to go back to. I mean, our people who died in the struggle, they didn't die for this nonsense.
No.
Really. So we will be talking about these things, but we have to go back to the real problem that we have in this country.
But where do
And
we
in the world,
Yes.
by the way.
And I was going to say that, Mahoro, but number one, where do we start? Having worked not only locally but also at an international level at the United Nations, what are the international best practices that we can learn from? Which countries have gotten it right? From a women empowerment point of view, from a point of also getting leaders that we can look up to, because it's not like there is a shortage of leaders in this country. They're just not given the space to be able to come out and do the work that they possibly can.
But you know, I don't even think that we have to be looking now at international best practice, because even internationally, things are not
Any better?
Yeah. You just look at reproductive rights. You have men sitting making decisions about women's bodies and deciding what a woman should do about her body, and treating that as if it is normal. You also have a situation where, I mean, even a basic thing, I mean, I was listening to this candidate president in America, DeSantis, saying now girls' sports will be girls' sport and boys' sport will be boys' sport. What is that? Girls now cannot play soccer. You know, and why should that be a matter that a governor has to pronounce on? Denying children the right to play because of their sex. You look at child marriage, men who marry, who rape children, because, you know, if a Kesha marries a little girl,
Yes.
you know, and then society accepts that. So you have to look at how we create a situation where these conditions do not exist in any society. Because if it is tolerated in one society, that kind of accepting of that behavior permeates all over. Yeah, so international best practice now, I just feel that it's not something we can rely on. We have to decide for ourselves what is important for us and what needs to be done. We are not the only ones, obviously, in this country who have these problems. Other people in other countries have got these problems. We also have to link with other people who share our views, so that we strengthen the views that are taking the world forward. This sort of anti-rights movement that is sweeping the world now, this populism that we have seen, it is organized. It is not something that is informal. People in different countries align with the people who think like them. I think that we also need to speak about the things we feel strong about in our country and beyond our country, so that our voices can be louder, and the issues that we want the country, the world, to take seriously are out there and are known.
Stephen, and I think that then speaks to also from a private sector point of view. You know, when you speak about corporate citizenry, we all have a role to play. We all have a role to play, and it's unfortunate that in our country we can't leave it at the hands of government, because we've seen what is happening. Same thing that Mama speak about now, that, you know, there's a leadership vacuum that we have. But then we then almost like turn to the private sector to say, what can we do? Because you're employing people. You've got various initiatives. You've got various programs. People spend 7 to 8 hours of their life within the corporate sector. How do we now start implementing things both internally and now see how they can then go out and permeate into society? Because that's what you'd like to see, because clearly we're not getting any help from government.
Yeah. Thank you, Meg, for that question. It's very important. I think one of our vision and passion at Unilever is making sustainability commonplace for everyone, and we mean that. Most of our strategy globally are based on, we have sustainability entrenched. You know what other companies does. It's the vision and the strategy of the organization and CSI. Sustainability for us, it's embedded in our brains. So I think it's very important that we look into the issues of, I was listening to Ma talking about child marriages, but if you look deeper, especially when you go to provinces like Eastern Cape, you'd find that is an issue of poverty. You'll find that there are women, abomama, that actually allows the children to be married because of the situations they find themselves in. So I think poverty and joblessness, has become an issue that perpetuates these illness that are happening into our country. So as Unilever, really, we have a lot of programs that we're implementing, and we not implement on our own, we collaborate, and this is what I've always said. Up until we can collaborate, sometimes you even collaborate with some of the private sector, because we have this thing of competitor. There's a coalition that is led by us, Tiger Brands and other companies are part of it, where we're looking into food security, working with social development as government. So I think it's about time we look into what is it that is a big issue in the country and how do we come together? Because when we come together, then we can do bigger and better and forget, part of my job is I'm a spin doctor for the organization, and forget the spin doctoring to say, this is what we do. This is what we've done. But looking into being the answer to what's currently taking place in the country. Poverty, it takes away dignity from our women. So they end up throwing themselves in things that they know consciously they wouldn't, but because of the situation they find themselves in, they end up doing certain things. So I'm very proud. I mean, there's a lot that I can talk about in terms of the work that we do across the country, but I think this is not the platform at the moment. We're trying to find solutions in how, women can really make progress. I mean, I was looking into the whole cooperative system. It's predominantly women.
Yes.
And 60%, don't quote me on that, of the cooperatives have failed. Do we go back as government and say, private sector has skills and private sector can assist it as mentors? Sometimes it's not even about money. It's about coming to us and say, because you have the know-how, the skills, how can you support the cooperatives that are getting millions and millions from government to make sure that they become part of your supply chain and you teach them in terms of how to run a proper business?
It does take a lot, and I think you touched on a very important thing here, and this is about some of the sort of compromising situations, especially young women find themselves in, even within the corporate sector. A lot of them face abuse of power by sometimes not just men, but even more often than not by men that are put into those places of power. But there's also a straightforward criminal element when it comes to these kind of things where now women have to find themselves in that situation. What can we do to protect them? How do we advise young women and young girls to say, if you find yourself in this situation, if you find yourself in this position, this is what you can do? How do we also give them support? Because more often than not, there isn't a support structure for them, and they almost feel like they're isolated and there's no one that they can go to.
Yeah, I think probably education is one, not the only, but is an important intervener here, especially for young women. Who actually still have the time to educate themselves, to acquire skills. And we also need to emphasize that both men and women now must not go to school and learn because they expect to get a job. We should emphasize the importance of thinking about creating jobs, because we can see that the labor market is shrinking. So it's not easy to expect that you'll find a job. So the skills, the education that we give now have to be so purposed for survival. I also think that for many young people, we also need to make sure they have the soft skills, the skills that enable them to navigate the world, which is really, really harsh. I imagine that for many of us, when we were younger, we thought that we were going to create a world for our children who will do better than us. I'm scared for the children now. I'm really, really scared. There's so many changes to begin with. I mean, if you just think about the changes in technology, I don't know where the children will be if they don't have the right skills. Not just the skills to make things now, but the skills to adapt. Because it's now we are not learning to know how to do something now. You have to have the skills so that you can adapt if things change.
Absolutely.
You have climate change that's going to also create new challenges and opportunities. Maybe in some cases, we are changing into a green economy. So that means that they need different sets of skills. So all of that, when I look at our education, I don't think that we are changing fast enough. So we have to, ask everybody to look at how we are making sure that these girls that we are talking about are empowered so that they can adapt better in the world that they are in. We also need to continuously talk about the ills that exist in our society. I mean, we are still an AIDS-ridden country. We are not out of the wood as far as HIV is concerned as a country. So behavior is still very important. It worries me that we don't see adverts these days. You don't see it on TV, you don't read about it in the radio, because it just gives an impression that, no, we're now done. We are so not done. We are one of the countries in the world that has the largest number of people who have HIV. And we have access to treatment. So at least there's something we can do about it. But it doesn't mean that if we have treatment, it means we should not be careful and we should not behave in such a way that we don't expose ourselves to danger. So we need to engage with the young people, the young women, and make sure that they are aware of these dangers that still exist in our country.
Thank you very much, Ma. I think I'm going to open it up to the people that are sitting with us here. I want to say to the crowd, it's not a crowd. To all our guests. Just now I'm going to say, can somebody scream? No. So I think if you just give them the mic over there and just say who what your name is and then who you're addressing your question to.
Hello, my name is Lula Mutipe. I am the capability lead here for customer development. I'd like to address my question to Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka. Firstly, I read a book by Dr. Judy Lamine, and you had a chapter in that book. I reread it this morning, actually. So I have a few questions, so please indulge me. The first one is, I'm paraphrasing. You mentioned in the chapter that there's a price to pay when you don't spend a lot of time at home as a woman. So I wanted to ask to please elaborate on what that time, what is that price? As a mom, I think that would be quite interesting, and as a wife. And then secondly, in the book you said, I'm a fighter. And you mentioned how you had to fight heads of states to put gender violence on the agenda. You reference fighting or quite a lot. So I wanted to ask, what is your fighting style? Because you come across so gentle.
I'm a nice person.
Yeah. Because, and there's that perception that you have to be aggressive, you know? What is your fighting style, and what have you learned about fighting as a woman? And then lastly, it's a little bit selfish because it has to do with my role. You also mentioned data quite a lot, how academia taught you the importance of data. And I think your PhD has technology in it. What can you tell us as a community, a Unilever community, about the importance of data? It's not a gender, that's not a gender question, but just in general about data and the importance of that.
Okay. So let me answer
Yes,
because
yes.
I'm going to forget.
Yes. But I've written down the price that you have to pay. What's your fighting style? Teach us, master. And then also the importance of data and academia.
Okay. Well, I think for people who are young mothers here, it's important to spend time with your children. For those of us who gave our lives a lot to the struggle, and I think it was the right thing to do, but it was at the expense of our children in many cases. It is important to leave a meeting and go and watch your son play soccer at grade 3, kicking the ball the other way. You know, it is important because you have to form relations and bond with them. The one thing that as a parent, mother and father, that is your absolute responsibility is your children. Bazobuzwa kuwe labantwana. So when everything else you have got, all the boards, all the accolades, etc., ke abantwana. So you just have to make sure that you balance your engagement. I didn't necessarily do it that well myself, but I don't wish it on other people. I really think it is important to give your quality time to your children because, you know, life is not a series of achievements. It is the memories of joy that you have with your family.
Wow.
That is priceless. So I'll leave it at that. Just balance, balance, balance. Then the issue of the fight, I mean, it's very important in the work that we do. And we fight with colleagues and so on, but we obviously don't mean to beat them up physically. So you have to engage and you must not give up. Just don't take no for an answer. And a job is not done until it's done. So my style of fight is persistence. Persistence, persistence, so that people bazotmana about, oh my God.
There she comes.
You know, sometimes they just have to give in because you are just gonna be there. And it's also important that when you disagree, you don't make it a quarrel that spoils the relationship. If you disagree with somebody, disagree in such a way that you can still go on and do other things. This disagreement must not mean the end of a relationship, especially a work relationship, because you need each other. I had to be fighting with heads of states in countries that I need to work in. So I couldn't afford to fight in such a way that I have bad relations with those governments because I actually need them. And sometimes when you fight with people, you certainly have to make sure that you can tell them to sort of go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. This is how well you. Yeah. So it's really is a style of engagement, but ultimately persistence. You have to persist. And on the issue of data, we all want to measure the things we do. We want evidence. So for all of those data, reliable data is important. So you have to, at the level at which you work, I'm sure you know, you just have to get reliable data so that you are not misguided, and the decisions you make, you can back them up with the data that you can gather. Well, I mean, just on a lighter note, the stress of studying while I was at university, and I went to university for my PhD when I was much older. I was above 55, so you can imagine I'm forgetful, I've got knee issues, and I'm going around with kids at the university. I'm like, yeah, ne? But so this kid, I greet you, say, how are you? He says, why are you collecting this data about how am I? What are you going to use it for? So don't ask questions that will give answers that have no use to you. Focus on the data for your PhD and leave me alone. I was like, yeah, hey, umuntu uyaphoqa.
Thank you very much for that, Mai. Would you like to pick up anything?
No,
Still, you're good?
no, I think there
let's
was
give
another
let's
question.
let's give an opportunity.
For the guys, yeah.
Good morning, Sithe. Good morning, Deputy President. I have two questions, one to you, Sithe. I've realized that, and you've touched on this point, over time, in our efforts in the black empowerment space, in our efforts in the women empowerment space, we just ended up creating an elite, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector. In your view, Sithe, how do you think that could be reversed? Because it seems as if there's this big elite that has been created in South Africa, and then we use that as a measure of success, either in the women's space or either in the black empowerment space. Deputy President, this is a very straightforward question. In your view and in your reflection over the last 30 years, do you think that the ANC has failed?
Hey,
Ouch.
hey,
Ouch.
hey. Hey, somebody please turn the aircon on, man. Just got hot in here.
You know, that's a very important question. Thank you very much for asking it. I think, look, we have a responsibility, be it in private sector or public sector, to break down the elitism, if you want to call it that. I think there's a lot that's been done by, I'm not going to talk about other organizations. I know the organization that I'm working for is very much intentional in making sure that we pull everybody up, especially when it comes to women empowerment. Like I say in my opening, we sit at over 55, 60, Shem? 59% to make sure that we bring everyone along. Government, I'm not so sure. But they are amazing. You know, we went to a session last week where we were told that we have one of the best democracy in the world. Exactly the same with the policies. We have one of the best policies in the world when it comes to women empowerment. Are we implementing those policies to make sure that we break down the ceiling and the, you know, and the elites that you see on top? Or is it a paper that's sitting there? We all can read it, but it's not implementation. My thinking is that there's no proper, Ma touched on leadership, but monitoring and evaluation that gives feedback in such that we continuously go back to our policies and try to amend them in such that they speak to this. Look, this is quite a journey for us. I think 2 years ago, as Unilever was sitting at 36%, today we are sitting at 59%, meaning that there's a lot of work that we're doing. So it's a continuous journey, and we need to embrace and to be fair and to be real, that it's not an easy one, right? I often ask myself, Ma, my apologies, Why do you have so many old people sitting in parliament advocating for issues that are impacting young people on the ground? I mean, when I go to parliament and say instant gratification is a problem for young women in universities, what are you going to do to address that issue? Do we even have platforms that allows the conversation for you on top? Because you see there, you have Minister of Women, you have Minister of Youth. These are not young people that are Minister of Youth. How in touch are they with the young people to understand that your policies might be looking great in paper, but we don't see it on the ground. It's not working for our people on the ground. Thank you.
I mean, if I can also ask, answer on this empowerment question. I really think that we have to review our whole empowerment approach, as well as emphasize and invest more on grassroots. As I was saying earlier on, even when we are looking for funding, women-based puzzle shops, they're not looking for a lot of money. You can actually reach many more people and address poverty more significantly if our empowerment is focused right at the bottom. I think the fact that we can empower 5 people, give them millions and billions, and then have so many people at the bottom who have nothing is absolutely, absolutely not right.
Absolutely.
So I think the institutions like the ones they have at DTI that work with small business, those should be stronger institutions in our society. They should be working at a municipal level, at a local level, closer to the people, in order for us to really spread access to relief, access to wealth, access to resources. I just feel that our whole economic trajectory is frightening. The inequality that we see is so deep, and at this point in time, I don't think that we are doing enough to try and change the direction of our economy. Maybe you guys can help us, but there's a real challenge in our country when it comes into, it's not even now empowering, it's just giving people, give people a break.
And hope.
You know, because this degree of poverty is just, it's unlivable for most people.
Look, I mean, and I'm sorry to interject, and I think we all saw that. We witnessed that, and especially Unilever as an organization would have seen that with the riots.
Yeah.
You know, when it was a huge shock for many of us in the country to say it's an indication of what is happening on the ground and how hungry our people are. And if we don't take it upon ourselves, you know, not only as a corporate, as government, as business, to create opportunity and employment for our people, when the food runs out at the shops, when it runs out at the tuck shops, when it runs out at all the places that have been looted, the next place is our homes. And it won't even be an issue of black, white, colored, or Indian. It won't be about color. It'll be about the haves and the have-nots. And if we don't, those rights did not conscientize us, we're really headed down a rabbit hole we'll never be able to get out of.
Yeah.
And of course, on the ANC, I mean, it's said that it's absolutely not where it's supposed to be. And we're failed by our leadership. And we created conditions that has made even the people that were on the track, if I think of the public service, having worked in the public service myself, and see the corruption that is there, somebody at the top created conditions for that to happen. And once people see that this is how it's done at the top, then it's free for all. And this is what we have now. We have a free for all. And that is bringing everything down. Maybe not everything, because there's still a lot of people who are working very hard, who are doing the right thing,
Absolutely.
who are fighting back, who are making sure that they are going to save the country. But we still need more people, not just in the public service, everywhere, because this corruption is everywhere. It's not just in the public service. And the responsibility to turn things around, it doesn't matter who made the mess, but turning it around, all of us have a role to play.
Yeah.
We absolutely have a role to play.
Before I take another, the lady here in the front, before we take you, I just want to go to hey, we're busy here, guys. We're social networking, we're busy, man, you know?
Facebook.
So there's a question that comes through from Facebook, and it goes to Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka saying, will Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka ever consider running for the highest office in the land?
Yeah.
I told you they must switch on the aircon. Gosh, it's an upper. That's serious conversations, lad.
You know, the way I am desperate for us to find our way, I will do anything that is necessary. But I also feel we also need to look for young people. If we cannot, and the situation is that desperate, well, yeah.
Come on, here we go. We'll go to you quickly, and then we'll take another one from Facebook.
Okay, morning everyone. Thanks so much to the organizers and the panel in front of us. My name is Jabu. My question is going to go to Mamphumzile. First of all, it's such an honor. I remember being in primary school, learning the cabinet, and I had to memorize the whole thing. So it's a bit surreal to be standing in front of you. You remember
Cabinet has come to you today.
Yeah. Remember the big ones that you'd get in the newspaper? We used to have that in our bedroom. So a surreal moment. My question is, I think what we're talking about today is, you know, it touches on inclusion of women, inclusion. So my question is about inclusion versus social justice, because inclusion means that we are including you from a system you were previously excluded from, right? We're inviting you to our party that you're not invited to previously. But social justice means that we are changing the party, we are changing the system, right? So that no one actually has to be included in the system itself. So I want to know that in South Africa, what do we need, and how do they overlap, those two? In South Africa, do we need more inclusion of women, or do we need social justice in changing the conditions and the systems that women have to fight so hard to get into? So that's my question.
Powerful, powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I think we need social justice in South Africa, because you obviously don't want women to go into a system and then perpetuate the injustice. But you also need inclusion. I think it's important that when women are advancing, they must know that part of the new reality for them has to be about changing the situation. If you think that, we think about young people who are at university, who are high school now, and you think about the future that awaits them, it just cannot be that this is what we have now. It's important that now, as they are approaching and as they are coming into their future, they must anticipate that they have to transform the future. And the issue of young people in particular is always very important, because every generation writes its own history. And in every generation, the world has some opportunity to reinvent itself. So it's important to continuously raise the issues of social justice with young people, because as a cohort, they can bring new sense of agency, they can bring new values, and they can help us in an intergenerational manner to actually realize how much we have gone off the rail and hopefully bring us back. It's sad that we don't have strong youth organizations in the country today. This is something that I think is a real problem for South Africa, because young people throughout history
Yeah.
are the ones who always bring fresh and new ideas, because while they are young, they are not paying for a bond, they are not gadangumtana and so on. So they can fight with a lot of conviction, because this is it for them. So youth movements are a necessity in society.
It's very interesting that you speak about that, because we've got a question here. It's quite long, but I think it's important that we read it. It says, "It concerns me that our children are establishing themselves outside the African continent because of a deliberate purpose of support these young women are receiving from these countries. These young people, including my own child, are either entering business and developing trade across the globe or furthering their studies. And these countries remain attractive in empowering opportunity for our young children. My only concern is that more and more of these young women are leaving the country and not considering coming back. Some of us will never get to see our grandchildren whenever my kids decide to marry in those countries, and family units are then broken."
Well, yes, it has a plus and a minus, because it's important for children to travel,
Yeah.
to go wherever and live their lives away from us and visit us and so on. But obviously, if we have a significant number of people, of young people in our country, leaving our country, then it is a concern. If they live forever and never come back, it is a concern. If they are unable to find purpose in their own country, that is also a concern. But I don't think that we can say no to them. I think that living in other countries, studying in other countries is part of the journey. We learn from that. We learn to live with other people. We learn to understand other cultures. But it's always important for us to remember our roots.
Yeah.
After all is said and done, this is the country that God entrusted us with. And we have to make sure that we do our best here. And to make sure, after all, if you think of the majority of the people in the township, in the rural areas, who will never go anywhere, if everyone who feels that they are educated and they have the means just up and go, you know, and you just leave everyone who is in the country who can't afford, that would be quite unfortunate. But I hope that does not happen. Comes back to the issue of working hard to make our country a country that most of our young people would love to live in and age and be gogos in, and not feel that they have to.
Just a bit, sorry. Just a bit on that question. Last week we had a very important tour as the leadership team. We went to the Constitutional Hill just to revisit it. And what I've learned there, the lady said we were having an ancestor moment, right? We are the current ancestors at the moment. We know what the previous ancestors have done. What are we doing to create a better South African for the generation to come? And I listened to my 14-year-old ma, who speaks so eloquently on how much she's not going to stay in this country after matric because of the social ills. I think there's a lot of negativity that you see in the media. Forget about joblessness and poverty. The other issues that are impacting young girls, being trafficked, being so much so they no longer have freedom to play outside because we are scared that our kids are going to be taken. So over and above, we having a generation that wants to go out there and work at a global stage. I think we still have to be realistic in terms of the social ills that are impacting this country. And again, what is government doing? Because if we are saying the young people and the youth are the future of this country, as the ancestors of today, what are we doing to make sure that we retain them in a country that is safe, where they can express themselves, where they will be given an opportunity without you having connections with whoever and whoever. So I think the issue is quite complex because when they are 14, most don't see color anymore, but it's the issues that they see on media, on television, on a daily, that makes them want to leave this country.
Mama, I'm just also going to give you a quick opportunity to give us your last thoughts and maybe pearls of wisdom as well. As you said, we are ancestors now.
We are.
So now we've got our chief ancestor here. So please leave us with some words of wisdom, Mama, so that we can take home with us.
Well, I don't know if I have any wisdom except concerns. I think the most important thing is to say, us sitting here, we are privileged. And to whom so much has been given, a lot is expected.
Absolutely.
So we cannot afford to only complain. We really have to be committed to bring about the changes we want, because you are the ones we have been waiting for. If we don't do it, it's not going to happen. So I just want all of us to make sure that we know that we are an important part of this country. And what we do, how we do it, can have a significant impact. And we must want to bring about the change that we want. So we must be purposeful and do things that are directed at bringing about a better South Africa. This cannot be the South Africa we fought for. It just cannot be.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Let's give a huge round of applause. That was Sithe Mlambo-Ngcuka as well as Sithe Ngobese as part of our In Conversation with Women of Unilever series. My name is McFarland Muledi. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored and blessed to have been given an opportunity to sit with two giants. And now that we know that they're ancestors, I'm really privileged that I got to at least hang out with them.
You are an ancestor.
So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone that also came on to our social media platform on Facebook, and to Unilever and everyone else. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Khotso, Pula, Nala. Good morning.